They found gold, they found glory, but they also found something no one expected: death. In 1922, when British archaeologist Howard Carter broke the seal on the tomb of Egypt's boy king, Tutankhamun, he unlocked one of the greatest discoveries in history. But almost immediately after the tomb was opened, people began dying, mysteriously, unexpectedly. A wealthy lord, a radiologist, a family member of the Egyptian royal line, all gone within months. Whispers spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed about a pharaoh's curse. Was it superstition or something darker? Something ancient that modern science couldn't explain. Today, more than a century later, experts are still baffled by what happened. The deeper you dig, the stranger the story becomes. And what really killed those who disturbed King Tut's rest? Let's go back to where it all began, a tomb unlike any other. When Carter and Lord Carnarvon cracked open King Tut's tomb, they expected grandeur. Instead, they found a cramped, rushed burial that didn't fit a pharaoh. The tomb was small, the paint was sloppy, and artifacts were stacked like junk in a storeroom. It looked hastily thrown together, nothing like the royal resting places of Egypt's great rulers. Even the location was wrong. Tutankhamun was buried far from his royal lineage, breaking tradition and isolating him in the afterlife. Many of the treasures looked reused, hand-me-downs from someone else's burial. It felt less like a royal send-off, and more like a last-minute scramble. And what they found inside the coffin only deepened the mystery. Whose coffin was it really? Tutankhamun's sarcophagus held 3 nested coffins, but one didn't belong. The outer and inner coffins matched, both styled for a pharaoh, both featuring the god Osiris. But the middle one? It looked off. The craftsmanship was different. The face didn't match the others, or even Tut's famous death mask. Experts now believe that coffin was never meant for him. It may have been made for Neferuaten, a mysterious female ruler tied to Akhenaten, Tut's father. Her rule vanished from records, and so did her burial. Signs of desperation were everywhere. Parts of the coffin had been sawed down to fit inside the sarcophagus. Archaeologists even found broken toes from a statue of Osiris shoved in too roughly. Literal pieces of the dead, damaged. The conclusion was chilling. Tut had died suddenly, and the burial team scrambled to bury him in someone else's tomb, with someone else's gear. And that wasn't the only thing wrong with his final rest. The pharaoh's mysterious death. Tutankhamun wasn't just young when he died, he was fragile. Born from incest between siblings, his body was riddled with genetic defects. He had a club foot, brittle bones, and a weak immune system. He walked with a cane. Over 350 were buried with him. And yet, he lived like a king. He rode chariots, hunted, and ruled, until it all ended abruptly. Theories about his death are all over the place. Some say malaria weakened him. Others believe he fell from a chariot and was crushed. His leg was shattered, his chest cavity destroyed, and, bizarrely, his heart was missing. Ancient Egyptians believed the heart was the soul's anchor, and they never removed it during mummification. So why was his gone? Even the embalming was sloppy. His body was cut open in a way no other mummy was. The preservation was so rushed, his corpse began decomposing before they could finish the process. Everything pointed to a sudden death, and panic behind the scenes. But the strangest twist was yet to come: the body that burned in the coffin. Years later, scientists made a shocking discovery. Tutankhamun's body had been burned, but not in some ancient funeral pyre. It happened inside the sealed coffin. The evidence came from a virtual autopsy led by Egyptologist Chris Naunton. fragments of flesh showed burn damage. For a moment, the idea of a curse seemed almost plausible. But then came a chilling explanation. During the embalming, morticians used a heavy mix of oils and resins, far more than usual. Combine that with the heat trapped inside the coffin, and something terrifying happened. A chemical reaction that may have caused spontaneous combustion. His body literally cooked inside the sarcophagus. It was a once-in-history embalming failure. And yet, it added fuel, literally and figuratively, to the idea that disturbing this tomb had consequences. But Tut wasn't the only one who suffered strange misfortune. The curse claims lives. Within months of the tomb's opening, people started dying. And not just anyone. Lord Carnarvon, the financier behind the dig, died suddenly of an infection from a mosquito bite. His half-brother died soon after. So did a radiologist who had examined the mummy. Even a member of Egypt's royal family was killed, shot by his own wife. In total, at least 13 people connected to the tomb's discovery died within a short span. Newspapers ran wild with the story. The curse of the pharaoh was front-page news across the world. But how real was it? Skeptics point out the average age of the deceased was over 70. Many had pre-existing health issues, and Howard Carter, the man who actually opened the tomb, lived another 16 years and died of natural causes. Still, the pattern was eerie enough to spark global fascination. Some even blamed ancient microbes sealed in the tomb, harmful spores or bacteria released after centuries underground. So was it supernatural or just science? The truth, as always with Tutankhamun, isn't so simple. Real causes or something more? Scientists have tried to explain away the so-called curse with logic. Some point to toxic mold spores, deadly bacteria, or long-dormant pathogens released when the tomb was opened. In theory, these could have triggered fatal infections in older or vulnerable members of the excavation team. But even that doesn't cover everything. It doesn't explain why Tut's heart was missing, or why his burial was so rushed, or how his body caught fire inside a sealed coffin. And then there's the reused coffin, meant for someone else. The mystery woman, Neferuaten. Why was her coffin handed off to a boy king who ruled for less than a decade? Every answer leads to another question. Every theory has holes. A century later, the story still doesn't add up. And maybe that's why it continues to haunt us. Because what happened in that tomb doesn't feel like an accident. A tomb that refused to stay silent. Tutankhamun died over 3,000 years ago, but the chaos that followed him into the afterlife is still unfolding. He was buried in a tomb not meant for him, inside coffins that didn't match, missing a heart and possibly burned alive after death. The embalming was rushed, the burial clumsy, and the aftermath? A string of deaths that gave birth to one of the most famous curses in history. Some call it superstition, others point to science. But even today, no one can explain all the oddities with total confidence. The story refuses to die, just like the legend of the boy king himself. And maybe that's the real curse, not one of revenge, but of endless questions. Questions that keep pulling us back into the shadows of his tomb, hoping the next layer of mystery will finally make it all make sense. But so far, it hasn't.